A head coach calling his own team the worst in football? That's the kind of brutal honesty we rarely see in the NFL. Antonio Pierce isn't just making headlines, he's saying what everyone's thinking, and it's setting up one of the most intriguing Black Friday matchups we've seen. And just when you thought the Raiders' quarterback situation couldn't get more interesting, a former first-round pick would rather be holding a clipboard for a contender than taking snaps in Las Vegas. That tells you everything you need to know about where this franchise stands right now. Meanwhile, in Kansas City, the rich get richer. Two game-changing players return just in time for the holidays. Both Pacheco and Omenihu practicing as full participants this week? That's not just a coincidence. That's the kind of momentum shift that could impact the entire AFC playoff picture. This is what happens when a division rivalry meets desperation, meets playoff positioning. The AFC West giving us exactly what we'd expect, and maybe a few things we don't. Remember last Christmas, when the Raiders walked into Arrowhead and shocked everyone? Yeah, that's why you can't write this one off just yet. Hey, what's up everybody? We're breaking down everything you need to know about this Black Friday showdown. The implications go way beyond just one game. We're talking playoff seeding, draft positioning, and maybe even some coaching futures on the line. And trust me, by the time we're done here, you'll understand why this game matters a lot more than that 12.5-point spread might suggest. Before moving on, if you're just finding us, hit that subscribe button. We're your home for everything AFC West right here on this channel. All right. Let's dive straight into what these teams are bringing to the table right now. The Chiefs, sitting at 10-1, might look like they're cruising, but the numbers tell a different story. Their offense isn't the unstoppable force we're used to seeing. They're just the 10th best scoring offense, 16th in the red zone, and 12th in passing yards. But here's what's interesting. Mahomes has thrown 12 touchdowns and only 3 interceptions in his last 5 games. That's the Chiefs we know starting to heat up at exactly the right time. Let's break down the X factor that's got everyone talking, the Chiefs' reinforcements. Pacheco is making return, and what does it mean? We're talking about the guy who brings that violent, explosive running style that's been missing from Kansas City's offense. His return isn't just about the run game, it's about what it does to defensive coordinators' game plans. When you have to account for Pacheco hitting those gaps at full speed, suddenly those play-action opportunities for Mahomes become a whole different problem. But the real game changer here might be Omenihu's return to the defensive front. Traditionally, one of the NFL's most dominant pass-rushing teams is currently tied for 5th fewest sacks in the league. That's not a typo. It's a major shift from what we've come to expect from this defense. But don't let those numbers fool you. Chris Jones is still putting up elite numbers, generating 51 pressures, second only to Zach Allen among interior defenders. His 17.3% win rate tells you everything you need to know about how opposing offenses have to account for him on every single snap. And add Omenihu to this mix, that's the kind of mid-season boost that can transform a defense. When you pair him with Jones, suddenly offensive lines can't just slide protection to one side. You're forcing opposing quarterbacks to make decisions faster, and against a young QB like O'Connell coming off injury, that could be the difference maker on Friday. Flip over to the Raiders side, and you're looking at a team that's found ways to stay competitive despite everything. They're actually 12th in passing yards allowed per game, not bad for a team that's supposedly the worst in football. But here's where it gets interesting. Their offense is averaging just 18.7 points per game, dead last in rushing, and now they're turning back to Aiden O'Connell. But before you write this off as a mismatch, remember what happens in these division games. The Raiders have shown they can make things interesting, especially against the Chiefs. They're sitting with the number 2 overall pick right now, and while that might be great for April, it's created an interesting dynamic. Do you play for pride against your biggest rival, or keep an eye on that draft position? The key matchups here are fascinating. The Chiefs' secondary has been allowing a 70.1% completion rate without Jalen Watson. That's a 10% jump. If O'Connell can exploit that, especially targeting Myers and Renfrow in the middle of the field, this could get interesting. Have you listened to the Las Vegas Raiders head coach Antonio Pierce? He referred to his team as the worst team in football during a press conference. He stated, "Let's call a spade, right? The best team in football against the worst team in football. Let's change the narrative. Let's go out there and make it a dogfight. Let's make it ugly. Let's make it scrappy. It's Black Friday. Let's create a little chaos." At this time, the Raiders held a 2-9 record, tying them with the New York Giants and Jacksonville Jaguars for the worst in the NFL, while the Chiefs led the league at 10-1. Now, Antonio Pierce isn't just throwing out sound bites when he talks about quarterback play in the AFC West. Look at the rest of the division: Mahomes, Herbert, even Russell Wilson, and then there's Las Vegas. When your head coach openly acknowledges that gap, it tells you exactly where their focus is going to be in the upcoming draft. But here's what makes this matchup so compelling. Raiders-Chiefs games have a history of defying the odds. Last Christmas wasn't a fluke. It was a perfect example of how divisions rivalries can flip the script. The Raiders didn't even complete a pass after the first quarter in that game, and they still walked out with a win. Pierce's message is ultimately about embracing their underdog status, fighting with everything they've got, and using chaos and grit as their tools to level the playing field against a superior opponent. The numbers for this Friday are telling: Chiefs allowing 228 total yards on offense in their last meeting. Raiders struggling on third downs, converting just 6 of 13. But flip that around. Kansas City's offense isn't exactly lighting it up either. They're the best third down offense in the league, sure, but they're in the middle of the pack in almost every other category. For O'Connell, this is a massive opportunity. Coming back from that thumb injury, facing one of the NFL's elite teams on national television, this is the kind of game that can define a young quarterback's career. The Chiefs' defense might be getting stronger with Omenihu's return, but they've shown cracks. If the Raiders can establish any kind of ground game, and that's a big if for the league's worst rushing offense, we might see something interesting here. Here's where I see this game playing out, and it might not be exactly what the odds suggest. Yes, the Chiefs are 12.5-point favorites, and there are plenty of good reasons for that. But I'm not seeing a blowout here, and here's why. First, look at what the Panthers just did last week. A struggling offense put up 27 points against this Chiefs defense. They found ways to move the ball, especially through the air. The Raiders, believe it or not, have more offensive weapons than Carolina, even in their current state. The key for Las Vegas is going to be the first quarter. If O'Connell can settle in early, if they can avoid those turnovers that killed them in their last meeting, this could be interesting. Max Crosby is going to be a problem for this Chiefs offensive line. He always is. And with the Raiders' secondary actually performing above average against the pass, there's a path to keeping this competitive. For Kansas City, it's about avoiding complacency. They can't walk in thinking about their playoff seeding or looking ahead to their Sunday night matchup with the Chargers. Pacheco and Omenihu's return is huge, but they need to manage those snaps carefully. This isn't the game to risk re-aggravating injuries. Experts are predicting Chiefs win, but in my opinion, it will be closer than people think. The Raiders will keep it interesting enough to make their draft-focused fans nervous, but not quite enough to pull off another holiday miracle. Expect O'Connell to show some flashes that make you understand why the Raiders passed on Daniel Jones, but also expect Mahomes to make those 2 or 3 plays that remind you why these teams are in such different positions right now. Watch the first quarter closely. It'll tell us everything we need to know about how this one's going to go. If the Raiders can keep it within 1 score early, we might just have ourselves a game worth watching this Black Friday. Alright, now it's your turn to weigh in. What do you think about Antonio Pierce's brutally honest approach? Is it the right way to fire up a struggling team, or do you think it's a step too far? And with the Chiefs getting key players back, like Isaiah Pacheco and Charles Omenihu, how much of an impact do you think they'll have in this game? Let us know your score predictions too. Can the Raiders shock the Chiefs, or will Kansas City show why they're one of the league's best? And finally, which players do you think will make the biggest impact in this divisional showdown? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this breakdown, and don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Until next time, stay tuned and let's see how this rivalry unfolds.